Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the latest episode of SchmoeTalks. That is right, we are back for another week of Schmoedown discussion. My name is Aaron Knoll. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching. And if you guys checked out last week's episode, you know that we are beginning a bit of a series where we're going to reflect back as we're beginning season 8 and take a look at some of the older seasons of the Schmoedown and kind of talk about some of the biggest moments. And today's episode was supposed to be seasons 3 and 4. However, in doing my research to prepare for this, I realized that I kind of melded the 2 years together and didn't realize that they did expand a lot quicker than I remembered, and there were a lot of matches this season. So this episode, we're just doing season 3. Season 4 will come in another episode. And with that being said, I have a panel with me here ready to discuss, as I put up there, the Schmoedown Takes Collider, the first full season and the first season at Collider. Joining me on this panel, up first, he makes his return to SchmoeTalks. He appeared in 2 of our episodes discussing the draft. He's a TMG regular. He is our TM Geek commissioner. Mr. Kevin Poss joins me. Kevin, how's it going, man?
It's going really well. Thanks for having me back on SchmoeTalks, Aaron. I hope my internet holds up well enough for this. But yeah, this is exciting to talk about season 3. Their first joining with Collider. Lots more matches. It's not the tournament style that they've had before. So yeah, let's get going.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here again. We'll have you back on in just a second. Second up, he is another newer member of the TMG regular team. He is the host of one of the many new shows that we've debuted on the channel alongside this show, the Supernova Show. He is Mr. Colton Roberts, joins us. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. It's not a bad day. Can't complain. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this. This is the first season where everything started ramping up, storylines, the matches started getting like really consistent. It's a good time. Like I can't wait to talk about it. How are you, Aaron?
I'm here, man. We're doing this. I'm excited. Gonna go ahead and drop you to the back again just for 1 second as we bring in our third person. And I believe, if I'm correct, this is his first appearance on TMG Anything. But as I said, the first few episodes we've kind of stuck to the TMG family, but I am all about bringing fans from other sects in, and he is here with us. His name is Mr. JD Domash. JD,
Hey, how's
thanks
it
for being
going?
on the show, man. How's it going?
Oh, sorry. Hey, how's it going?
Good, man. Thank you for being here. Excited to have you. You looking forward to it?
Yep. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to talk about season 3. Seeing a lot of beginnings of a lot of the elements that we love about Schmoedown, while still, working at the kinks a bit.
Absolutely. So with that, I'll go ahead and bring Kevin and Colton back into this. And before we get onto it, we're briefly going to go through. So last week, I announced that some of the upcoming guests have all been kind of put into a pool where we're going to have them make predictions on the upcoming matches. And I said that, we'll come up with a better format for it. It's just something I thought of, a cool idea. So here's what this is going to be. The next few upcoming guests who are going to be appearing on our season recaps are going to have the opportunity to put forth their predictions for all the matches, starting with the matches that aired last Friday, going straight through the final match of March. And what we're going to do is the person who predicts the most correct matches will have a choice of one of 3 prizes. They will either get to appear on SchmoeTalks and pick their own Schmoedown related individualized topic to have a discussion about for the length of the show. They will have the opportunity to host their own episode of SchmoeTalks with me as just kind of the side piece. And we'll try and figure out either maybe a fan, or if we can secure a cool guest, we'll do something to bring it in and make it cool for them. Or they can appear on another show that on our channel, TMG's After Dark, which is kind of our discussion movie show that we do on Saturday nights. So we have 3 prizes up for the grabs. The winner will get their pick, and that's what we're playing for. So we're going to run over the results really quickly. So I'm going to flash through the screen some of our upcoming guests, because they are not set to appear on the show until after the matches have aired, I had put their predictions in through text, which includes everybody, because obviously on Friday we had our first match go up, which was our first two matches. We had Laura versus Molly, and we had Chandru versus Mara. Now, if you guys remember back to last week, I was joined by TMG's Matt Beer and Ryan Payne. On that episode, all three of us voted for Laura Kelly in the Star Wars match. And then on the second match, myself and Matt voted for Chandru, and Ryan voted for Mara. So as we run through the previous predictions put in, JD put in for Chandru and Laura Kelly. Colton put in for Molly and Chandru. Kevin put in for Molly and Chandru. And then some of the other guests we have coming up, Andy Sweet put in for Molly and Mara. We had Michael Bright Dingus put in for Molly and Mara. We had Erica Chia. She obviously, her appearance is a little later. She has more names there, but Molly and Mara. And Jacob Barber, I'm sorry about that, man, put in for Chandru and Laura. So basically, the way that this is going to work is every correct prediction gets you a point. Every incorrect prediction gets you absolutely nothing. Whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. It's a very, very simple system that can't absolutely fail. So what that means is that next week I'll have a graphic prepared with the new matches put in, so that way, you know, we have a good look for the show. I'll come up with something. But starting off this week, we have from, and I'll have to, again, read a little bit over. So Ryan starts out with the lead with 2 points, getting the only person to get both predictions correct. He predicted both Laura and Mara. So he starts off with 2 points. Myself, Matt, JD, Andy, Michael, and Erica all get 1 point. And I believe, unfortunately, they're both here on air with us, but Kevin and Colton are the only two to not receive a point this week. They both made the incorrect prediction on both matches.
I picked Molly.
Molly did not win. Laura won.
Oh, Laura won. Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'm an idiot. Sorry.
Yeah, so that is the way that crumbles. Like I said, next week we'll have a graphic, and obviously this week we have 4 more matches, so the graphic will be a little more laid out. But right now we do have a leader. We have an official leader in Ryan. We have that giant second place tie, and with a max of 2 points able to earn third place for Kevin and Colton is absolutely nothing. This is just a bunch of jumbled words. It'll all make sense when we have a graphic next week, I promise. But quickly, before we get into the seasons, we are going to run through the remaining matches in March, since I have these 3 gentlemen here with me, and we're going to go ahead and have them turn in their predictions. Now, as with last week, we're going to do it as briefly as humanly possible, since there are a lot of matches. We're going to just go with a name prediction, and if you have a quick one-line blurb about the ones you're more passionate about, we can live with that, but we're going to go as quickly as possible. Got it?
Got it.
So we'll go ahead and get into this. It's going to go around the horn, just kind of like last week. So the first match that we have is Amaru Moses versus Jesse Swift. As I said, it's a SchmoeTalks debate here. They were both my first 2 guests, and they were both on the same episode. So now they're playing each other. Kevin, we'll start with you. Amaru or Jesse?
Love Jesse, but gotta go Amaru.
All right, Colton.
Amaru.
And JD.
I think this is going to be unanimous on Maru.
I think so far it actually isn't unanimous, which means if Jesse wins, we're all screwed.
Yeah.
Up next, Star Wars match, Marie Wilson versus Sean Sullivan. Kevin.
Sean Sullivan.
Colton.
I agree with Sean Sullivan.
And JD.
I also have Sully.
All right. We move on to the third match of this upcoming week. We have the singles match, Vinny Mancuso taking on Marisol McKee. Kevin, who's your winner?
Marisol.
All right. Colton.
Marisol.
And JD.
I think like we're all saying the same thing. Marisol.
All right. Eventually, we'll have a switch up. We'll see when that comes. And finally, we have the fourth match of the first week of March. Dan Merle takes on Jeff Snyder in a number 1 contenders match. Who's going for that title, guys? Kevin, you're up first.
Dan.
Colton.
Jeff Snyder.
All right. And JD.
This is going to be a bummer for my fantasy league, my fantasy roster, but Dan.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the second week of March. We got 3 matches on that one. Up first, the Inner Geekdom match, Saul versus John Humphrey. Kevin, who takes it?
Saul.
All right, Colton.
John Humphrey.
All right, and JD.
Saul.
All right. Next up, we move on to the second match of that week. We have a singles match between 2 rookies, Brother Lomas and Frankie Alvarez. Kevin, who takes it?
I'm interested to see what Brother Lomas can do, so I'm going to go with him, Brother Lomas.
All right, and Colton.
I'm going to go Frankie Alvarez.
All right, and JD.
This is really a toss-up for me because I really don't know anything about either of them, but I'll go Brother Lomas.
All right. And then the third match of the second week of March, we have another singles match, Chance Ellison versus Brendan Meyer, 2 people who deserve a better record. Who's getting it? Kevin.
Chance.
Colton.
Brendan Meyer.
All right, and JD.
Brendan Meyer.
All right. We move on then to the third week of March, the 17th through the 19th. We got 5 matches airing that week. The first of them is another IG match, Brandon Hanna versus Eric Zipper. Kevin, who takes it?
Zipper.
And Colton.
Brandon Hanna.
All right, and JD.
Another toss-up, but I'll go Hannah.
All right. Then up next that week, we have another Star Wars match. I believe if I remember correctly, this was such a who's who, I actually flipped a coin for my pick. We have Lacey Gillerin versus gold leader Evan Bushkar. Kevin, who takes it?
No, Evan Bushkar is the real deal. Gold leader.
All right. Colton.
I agree with that. Gold leader.
And JD.
Lacey. I'll be a contrarian.
All right. And then we have the first of 2 singles matches that week, Janine the Machine takes on Jada Paramo. Kevin, who wins?
Janine.
We have Colton.
Jader.
And JD.
Janine.
All right. Then we have the event, the Schmoedown Throwdown that week, the undercard, William Bibiani versus Paul Oyama. Who takes it? Kevin.
Bibbs.
And
Bibbs.
Go to Colton. You're good. I got you.
Paul Oyama.
All right. And JD.
Bibbs.
All right, and then we get into the Star Wars match. Now, as of the moment, it has not been announced if this will become a triple threat with Laura Kelly or not. If it does, then I will give everybody a chance to adjust their predictions. But as of now, Alex Damon versus Andrew DeMolanta. Kevin, who wins?
Demolanta.
Alex Damon.
Damon. And JD.
Damon, and I also believe Christian basically said Damon declined the triple threat, so it's going to be a double.
Okay, cool. I must have missed that at some point, but yeah, I didn't know. But if it does end up happening, we'll allow everyone to readjust just in case what we had. Just to make sure I got that down because this one confused me last week too. We have Demolanta for Kevin, and then Colton and JD say Damon.
Yeah.
Still correct? Okay, cool. Just making sure. Last week, initials got me confused. So then we have the final week of March. We have the matches. The first one, singles match. Actually, I think it's a week of all singles matches. I just realized that. So the first of 5, Video Drew versus Elliot Dewberry. Kevin.
I'm going to go Video Drew.
All right. And Colton.
Elliot Dewberry.
All right. And JD.
Video Drew.
All right. The second match that week in singles, we have Christy V, who I was informed last week is actually Christina Vassallo. I did not know who that was when I read the name. And we have the Rager Rick Radis from the Exchange playing each other. Who's winning that one? Colton or Kevin? Who cares? I know your voice, so start talking.
Rick Radis.
All right, Colton
Gotta go with Christina.
and JD.
Radis.
All right. Third match of that week, Paul Preston versus James White. Who's taking it, Kevin?
Oh man. I'm gonna go with James White.
And Colton
Paul Preston.
and JD.
Paul Preston.
All right. And then finally, we have the first Schmoedown Battlefield event taking place at the end of the month. 2 main event level matches. The first, Liz Shannon Miller takes on John Roca. Kevin, who wins?
Man. I'm gonna go with Liz Shannon Miller.
All right. Colton
I am also gonna go with Liz Shannon Miller.
and JD.
Mm.
This is a toss-up for me. But I guess I'll go to contrarian route again. I'll go Roca.
All right. And last one, the other main event of the Schmoedown Battlefield, Ben Bateman takes on Mark Riley. Kevin, who wins?
I think Bateman's got him.
And Colton
Ben Bateman.
and JD.
Bateman.
All right, and those are the predictions, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, guys. Those will be entered officially onto my chart so I can keep track of it once we're finished. But thank you, guys. Again, as I said, we now have a prize in place for those who are had the opportunity to put forward their guesses here. And who knows, maybe if this goes well and the people have fun, we'll get another pool of guests and we'll do another one later in the season. But there we have it, guys. We have all the predictions in for these gentlemen. And obviously this week we have 4 more matches coming, so there's a lot of opportunity for someone to take a lead here. That being said, we are almost about 17 minutes in now, so let's go ahead and get to the topic of discussion. Season 3 of the Schmoedown. As I said, it was the first season at the Collider Studios. The venue changed, and it was the first season where it was really a league. You know, we did get the Ultimate Schmoedown tournament later in the season, but we had a season's full of matches before we got there. And so the way we're going to go through this is, for the most part, we are going to be staying in chronological order. I've mixed up a few matches here or there just for the sake of keeping the grouping consistent, but I've grouped the matches up into sets of matches that we'll talk about because they all kind of have something in common. And this first set of matches that we're going to talk about for a little bit, intro or bring people into the new era of some big personalities that would go on to play a big part in the Schmoedown over the first few seasons. And this tells you how much Season 3 established when I say all of these matches were in the first 10 matches of the season. We had the first match of Season 3, John Campia took on Dan Merle. The second match, John Roca took on Scott Mantz. We had Hal Rudnick take on Sam Levine. Josh McCouga took on Clark Wolf. And the one that everybody remembers for the worst possible reason, Jeff Snyder took on Humberto Maimbe, or El Maimbe, Humberto Gonzalez, excuse me. Let's go ahead and get into it. Kevin, I'll start with you on this rotation. Which one of those matches stands out to you in terms of memory? And I mean, again, like I said, this is a lineup of people there who would, some of them would go on to have a huge impact, multiple future champs. Let's talk about it. What do you think?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of multiple future champs on there, a lot of familiar faces. That Campia Merle match was, I think it was a TKO, very low scoring.
It was. And I do have the scores on hand if anybody wants it. Yeah. So that
Mance beat.
I'm sorry. That one in particular.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the score.
I think Mance beating Roca was probably the most surprising one to me out of that list, though.
Yeah, and obviously that win comes with kind of a moment that really cemented Roca going forward for a bit in the gap.
Yeah.
I'd say it still holds
Oh, yeah.
Will never forget that
Johnny-
moment for as long as he plays in the
No. Every single match, there's a comment in the comments or somebody makes a comment on the stream that's, about Bespin. So I think that's going to be cemented forever.
He will forever be followed by Bespin. Yeah, so to run down the scores quickly, because I do have them, of those first set of matches, Merle won by TKO 13-6. Mance won 17-15. Levine will beat Hal Rudnick 15-12. Clark beat Makuga 17-15. And obviously the one everyone remembers, Jeff Schneider KOs Umberto Gonzalez 16-4. Honestly, that's the one that stands out to me simply because, it not only showed that Jeff could potentially be a dominant player going forward, but just damn, like, I don't think there's a player, and it's unfortunate that it happened to him. I don't think there's a player that's played since that has had such a lack of understanding of the rules. And I actually think it helped them that somebody had this kind of a gap early on, because it meant that they realized, okay, we have to explain this to more people going forward. People like Matt Ashley who forget the little things there will never be helped, but at least everybody goes into the game knowing the bare bones basics, and that's really what hit him, was just he didn't understand the game he was playing. And it made Schneider look so much better for that win. Colton, I go to you. Which of these matches stands up to you, man?
I mean, Dan's match with John Campia. That's where we started the GOAT. Right there. You can see if that match goes any way different, we may not have the history that we have now.
True.
And it's also such a deceptive TKO too, because it was the round one was almost completely different. Like each person had like two different sets of questions.
Yeah, so let's get into that, right? So the original game, and obviously not the original game, but they made some rule changes going into season 3. But one of the things that they kept was from the original, on the couch Schmoedown, was each competitor got a different set of questions, which was one of the things that was later changed because people kind of started calling it out as unfair. But yeah, each competitor, you just had to randomly. My favorite thing was when I was going through one of the matches we'll get to a little later, which was Freddie Prinze Jr. versus Sam Whitweir. Whitweir put it perfectly when they asked him the question, and he just looks at them and goes, "So arbitrarily, I have to pick which number I like more, 1 or 2."
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it was. Is you just kind of pick a number and hope you don't get screwed by it. And that did have a weird impact on matches. But this was also the season where we saw the round 3 be put in place that we know now, except the point values were 1, 3, and 5, not 2, 3, and 5. That's also something that would be adjusted later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, Colton, do you have anything else to comment about that first match or any of the others that interest you?
I mean, of course, like the Bespin moment will always be legendary. The Jeff Snyder beating Umberto will always be. But Sam Levine, like this was also the start of, like, he didn't do great this season, but we knew he was going to. He was going somewhere.
Yeah, that's kind of the interesting about that match. After that match, everybody was like, he's our future champion. He's going to be, that's the guy that you need to look at, because, there was the game, the Schmoedown, the Schmoes No show that they had, and he always was like the best at the game. So everybody just immediately felt that he was going to be the best. In the first match, he actually did pretty well, like really well in the first match. It's when we get into the next batch of matches, when you get to Clark Wolf and Sam Levine, that's where it kind of shifts a bit, and it would be a couple of years before he actually.
Or when he gets beat by Mark Ellis.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And obviously, like, if you guys need to, because some of those in between matches are going to get left out here by nature. We can only pick so much of a season to really focus on. But if at any point, when we're talking about a player, some of those other matches come up, please don't be afraid to mention them, because they do all play into it. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move on. So at the beginning of the season, we had, those first few matches really start to establish, strong play by Merle, strong, even though they lost, strong play by Roca, strong play by Sam, Clark, Jeff. But we get into the first set of title matches, and obviously teams didn't get established till later in the season. So early on, back to back to back, we had 3 very early title matches. The first, and if anyone remembers it, please inform me, but I don't know, despite the fact that they had the same record, or a close record, I don't know why JTE got picked, but Riley and JTE played each other for a title.
I can help you out with that.
Yeah, please go ahead if you remember.
So basically, the MVP of the team tournament was going to get a title, and JTE was the MVP of the team tournament. So,
because that makes sense, because that was one of the things when I was reading through, I realized him and Makuga both had a 3-1 record, and Makuga got a rookie and he got the title shot. But that makes sense. So thank you for bringing that in. So Riley and JTE played. Riley defended 17-7, won by knockout, and that was followed by Mark Riley versus Dan Murrell, in which Murrell would take his first of what would go on to be 4 titles from Mark Riley. And then he very quickly had to defend against Clark Wolf, in which he would beat Wolf 11-4 by TKO. Not the prettiest of matches there. So I'll go ahead and start with JD first, because you said kind of the least on the last bit. Which of those matches really stands out to you of that set?
Well, there are a couple matches that kind of stand out. I mean, JTE and Riley does stand out to me for a number of reasons, because that week, basically, I know we're not going to talk about it, but it is kind of important to bring it up.
No,
this, in combination with Bob versus the Schmoes No, really, this one really what brings up Little Evil. Like, this is what turns JTE from everybody's hero to Little Evil. So to me, that's very important, because this changes the trajectory. He was a face before this, and this was the turn, so to speak.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but for anybody who wants to hear thoughts, that is the one big match that I made a choice to exclude, simply because it was discussed in our last episode with myself, Ryan, and Matt, because it was also the conclusion to Season 2. Season 2 never got to end properly before they moved from the Afterbow Studios, so they ended it as a part of Season 3. But yeah, you were absolutely right. In terms of the beginning storylines, that is one of the big matches alongside that Riley match.
And then also, of course, Riley versus Murrell, because this kind of like cements that like Murrell is this unstoppable force.
Yeah, 18-15.
Yep.
If I could speak on that one, that's the one that stands out the most to me, mainly because Riley was 5-0 at that point. He seemed kind of unstoppable, and then that's where the Murrell GOAT really kind of like became a cemented thing in my mind. Like he really became the greatest, legendary, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, and obviously there was a match there was a stepping stone match that I cut out just simply because we're talking about where this kind of not how they got there, but I believe it was Dan played Scott, because they both won their first matches, and the winner of that was immediately made the number 1 contender at 2-0. So Dan was playing Riley at 2-0 when Riley was 5-0, and that's kind of how it was a lot of the time in the
5-0
seasons.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It very much was a big thing for him to beat him. Colton, what are your thoughts on some of these matches? Which one of these stands out to you?
So it's always been weird for me that JT got the title shot whenever I know the team champion MVP thing was the case. But I always remember in the season when Mark Riley promised Josh Makuga a rematch, and we never got it. And now we never will. So that was always weird for me watching it back then. But I agree, the Dan Murrell match, like they already established like the little story of them not reforming team champs. Mark Riley decided to go with Clark Wolf, and instead Dan Murrell beat Mark Riley and then beat Clark Wolf just to show him up. So I love that.
And also, speaking to that, they were pushing him as a heel because they wanted Riley was the face, so they kind of knew that this collision course was gonna. After his first match, they kind of realized this collision course was gonna happen. So they started pushing him as like a heel, and it's very unlike as we get into later seasons. It's very unlike Merle, but now you're starting to see the kind of heelish Merle thing that he was doing back in season 3 pop up again here in season 8. So it is kind of interesting to look back at this too. Watching season 3, watching the past several seasons, and then watching this current season where he's going kind of back to the heel angle.
Yeah, absolutely. It is weird, like how things have really started to circle back going into season 8. You know, Roka's back as a heel. Dan's kind of back in that weird in between phase. Because I don't think personally they ever pulled off Dan as a heel, but he certainly wasn't a face. He was kind of that in between stage. So it's weird to kind of see, you know, 5 years, 6 years later, it's kind of reverting back to that stage. So we'll go ahead and move on then and get into the next couple matches. And this one might not be as long, but it is something to talk about. Though a lot of them don't have a lot of great impact on the Schmoedown, and a lot of the times the performances are a little lackluster. The celebrity matches were a thing in the Schmoedown for a couple of years, where as part of working through Collider to promote other products or promote other people, they would bring in celebrities to play. This season saw the first 2 celebrity matches happen. Now, they weren't branded as such, especially when we move into something like season 4, they would begin getting branded differently. But they were technically celebrity matches, except these 2 would have repercussions in terms of player futures. So let's go ahead and talk about them. The first was, as they jokingly called themselves in it, the Force Bros, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sam Witwer, in what was a singles match. Now, I forgot about this match. I thought
it was actually a decent match too.
It is a decent match, actually.
11-9, Whitwer.
I liked it.
Yeah.
And then the other one, obviously, the Olympian Cody Miller took on JTE and became America's hero when Cody Miller beat JTE. He is, and we'll get to another one later, where a player comes in, plays one match, and is never to appear again. But he does beat JTE 9-12. So let's go ahead and talk about those. You know, and obviously the celebrity matches are something I think even kind of Christian looking back on it, where it's something they've wanted to step away from a little bit and make it more you're a part of the league or you're not kind of a deal, even though there are celebrities still playing. But these were the foundations, and these would go on to have effects down the road. Obviously, both Whitwer and Prinze Jr. would come back. Whitwer would win a title. And Miller beating JTE really aided in the story. So I'll go ahead and go to Colton first. Why don't you go ahead and get into what you think about these 2 matches?
Yeah, I love the Whitwer and Freddie Prinze Jr. match. How they both chose, or one of them got Star Wars, and then the other one got Spinner's Choice and selected Star Wars.
Yeah,
and that was so interesting, and that's essentially the beginning of the Star Wars League right there. Is how that match went, and then they formed the Force Bros and wanted to team up against, and then Champion Knapsack.
We'll get that.
The 2 weeks or whatever before Spectacular. So that's wonderful, and I really like the JTE match. Like, I am not a huge fan of JTE as a heel during this time. Like, I was just so happy that he lost. Like, looking back, I'm like, I shouldn't have thought that. This guy actually cares about this, and we'll never see that. We never see that dude ever again. But at the time, I was like, woo, beat him. I don't know.
That's the one. Speaking of that one is the one that sticks out to me because also I remember that match. Cody Miller had the worst first round. Like, he was like way behind. It was an amazing comeback that like JTE just like had a terrible round 2 and a terrible round 3 that ended up just, you know, allowed Cody Miller to come back. And it's also, as I said, this was the first time he appeared as Little Evil. So again, this is the official. We're now in the turn. And yes, the Sam Whitwer match. and Freddie Prinze Jr. match just has a place in my heart as the official beginning of the Star Wars League, which we'll get to. I'm sure we'll get to later. That team match did happen between the two of them.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to note when I was going through and pulling the graphics is I love the little these posters for looking at it now, they're all very crudely edited in the best way possible. But I love how half of every poster had sunglasses, kind of like this one. And they used swimming goggles in the same effect with this poster.
Yeah.
I like that little detail. But Kevin, go ahead.
And the swimming cap too.
Yeah, the hat.
There's not a whole lot I can say that these guys haven't already said. I love the way the Star Wars stuff worked out, and it really did spark the desire for a Star Wars league or division, and I love it. Whitwer, in his own right, like you said, came and became a force. No pun intended. But Freddie Prinze Jr. was awesome, though. I thought he held his own and did well. I kind of forgot about the other match, but it was what it was. It was interesting, but yeah, the Freddie Prinze Jr. Whitwer match was definitely that's one that I always kind of harken back to.
It seems Sam Whitwer doesn't want to come back because Alex Damon and is the ultimate match that everybody wants to happen, and if it ever does happen now, it'll be kind of like how Floyd Money Mayweather faced Pacquiao. It's just not the same thing. If it ever happens now, so it's just kind of
true.
This is true. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on from those, and let's get into something that brings a little more bulk to the discussion here. So obviously, we didn't talk about the first teams match of the season, which was that finish up of season 2, the title match between the Schmoes and Box Office Breakdown, in which the Schmoes were crowned the first teams champs. But in that, it took a little while for the teams league to get going. It wasn't until about halfway through the year where they really started producing teams matches. But once they did, they went for it in full force. And so kind of like what I did with the singles matches earlier, I pulled the first few teams matches that they aired so we can kind of talk about the foundations they laid for the teams league. So we have, obviously, this one was a story match, but we had the Patriots versus the Mega Powers in what was a epic beginning for the Patriots, 19-3 win by knockout. We had a number 1 contenders match between Rotten Tomatoes and Team Top 10, in which Top 10 would win the title shot. We had Wolves of Steel take on Team Heroes, Robert Myers Burnett and rest in peace, John Schnepp, a match that would actually see the Wolves of Steel lose on their first match, 16-15. We had the first 2 kind of joke fun teams of the league, ETC taking on now currently the longest standing team in the league, still the Real Rejects, in a match that would see ETC win. And then we build up to that second title match where the Schmoes took on Top 10 in a match that would end 19-8, knockout win for Top 10. Let's go ahead and get into it. So this was the beginning of the teams league. These were the first real set of teams matches we got. Some of those teams obviously would go on to get title shots. They would go on to play for a bit, have some good records. And in the case of the Real Rejects, they're just still there having fun all these years later. So what match Kevin, I'll head to you first.
The one that stands out to me is that Patriots win over the Mega Powers. Makuga and Finstock kind of coming back and trying to, get some revenge, I guess you would say, over, JT and Schneider, but just getting absolutely curb stomped, 19-3. So that was ugly, but, like you said, I love how the Real Rejects, I actually just wrote that down. Like, I love how they're still just hanging around, doing their thing. And it was sad to see the Schmoes lose to Top 10, I think, but that kind of, I feel like that was kind of the start of their descent. But it is what it is.
And we'll go ahead and pull up this picture before I'll let Colton go next. But can we talk about how this is the only picture in the world in which Roka is the least juicy looking person in the picture? I mean, look at that.
Is very accurate.
I mean, Nose looks like he's the other two, and yeah, let's not even get into that. Colton, go ahead, man. What are the
So, the Patriots and the Mega Powers, huge match. Like, this is right off the back of the decision. And that's a wonderful story. And then the Patriots went on to win.
Mhm.
And in their own right, the Wolves of Steel formed during the decision, but then they went on to lose. So it's so weird how that story beat. The Patriots formed and they won their match, but the other two teams that formed because of that decision, they both.
That actually is the one that's sorry.
No, I was going to say before I turn it over to you, JD, because I know you're a big story guy, so I assume that's where you're going to go. It is interesting to kind of think about how when that move happened, everybody looked at JTE like, dude, what the hell are you doing? This is going to go so badly. And the Wolves of Steel were seen as really a mega team at the time. And really, it was the Patriots who would go on to have the last laugh. Obviously, the match was not in Season 3, so it's not something we can go in depth into. But they would eventually play each other for a title match, and the Patriots would win. And when you put that with the never-ending run they had this season, which began this year, it really does say a lot about how that decision went down. But go ahead, JD.
Yeah, I was going to say that it said those two are really the ones that stick out to me: the Mega Powers and the Patriots, and the Wolves of Steel match and the Heroes. To me, those are the two that stick out for, as I said, the story reasons. The Wolves of Steel were set up as like they were supposed to be. This is to me, they're kind of like this early era's Who's the Boss. This great team that never really was. Like they are just like they're so close, but they never make it. They never get there. They never make it to the promised land. You see the potential, it just never gets there. And this would that's why they kind of remind me of Who's the Boss in that way. And then yes, we can talk about the Patriots, how that decision, it was a constellation. Like this it was kind of the fact that like Jeff Snyder came in there kind of was played off as like a consolation prize because like first JT wanted to play with Clark Wolf. Clark Wolf went with Mark Riley instead. Then he was like, "Oh, I'll go back to Finstock," and then nope, Josh McCouga. And then as I said, it was played off as like this consolation prize. Oh, I was here and da da da. And I remember we were talking about this, and no, we're gonna play together. Yay! It was played off as like this consolation prize. And they were the first really super team, kind of, or like the first dominant team that we had in the team's division. So it's really weird to see that. And on the other front, the Mega Powers. My God, we're probably going to get into that later. But the Mega Powers, Jesus.
They do not come back up again, but if you'd like,
I want to talk about the Mega Powers because
go ahead briefly.
Basically, they lose this match. They play one more match that they win, and then they break up. Like right then and then there, and that's how we get like the really like the I think it's season 4, but you get like the Finstock, Josh McCouga retirement.
That's the beginning of season 4. Yep.
But I just in general like that sets up the whole thing with them. So like this is the beginning of that. So those are the ones that always stand out to me.
It is, yeah, and I believe it was the Wangers that they played that second match.
Yeah,
it's weird to think that a team broke up on the match they won.
Yeah,
like that's the most Finstock thing I think you could do is to actually win a match confidently, and then walk out on your partner. That's the pinnacle of it right there. But yeah, it is interesting, and obviously we'll go into the title match that happened, the top 10 versus the Schmoes, and that win, it's weird to say because it's so early, but that win feels like the pinnacle win for top 10 because, you know, the Patriots would win. And despite the fact that I believe, if I remember correctly, with the exception of that one team action match, top 10 would beat everybody they would go on to play after this, except the Patriots. And it's for that reason they would never get a title again.
Yep.
And it's weird how they kind of like, it's an interesting comparison, you know, really, there's two teams here I think you can make interesting comparisons when you're talking about the player, right?
Yeah.
Because you said Wolves of Steel looks a lot like Who's the Boss, and there's actually a major 50% component of both of those teams that plays into that in Mark Riley, you know, the man who kind of gets so close but never could with those titles. And then with Roca, him and Dan kind of ended up running into the same thing with Corruption, where I'm pretty sure they beat every single team they played except Corruption, who they did beat once, but all their losses came to them. And that's a really funny dynamic that it's just that kryptonite moment kept you away from all the glory that top 10 probably could have had in that era because they were one of the better teams.
Yeah, it's always that one. They always ran into that, like you said, for the top 10, they always ran into that one team that they just couldn't beat. And it just happened to be the Patriots was that they were always the champions, so that's why they could never win it back. But at least they won the championship. It's really weird. Like, there are three really big rivalries for top 10. There's, as I said, there's team action, there's the Patriots, and then there's, again, we're getting into season 4 and on, but those, I guess it's two. It's really them and team action.
I mean,
those are really the two rivalries.
You could say the Schmoes because they played them twice, and one of them was in season 4, but they played them twice. And I'm pretty sure in that, if I remember, because I watched both those matches.
One of them was an exhibition, though.
No. So they did play.
Oh yeah, they did it again.
Matches.
They did do it again.
And I only know this offhand so easily because I plugged for another show. Ryan Payne, our TMG member, has a show, Mount Schmoedown. If you're not watching it, check it out. But I did the Matt Nost episode with them, so I watched through all of his matches again. And I'm pretty sure they made some joke rivalry out of it because at some point it was one of the times that a Schmoes No Related program the top 10 was like in the middle of there at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it is interesting. So let's go ahead.
Speaking before we move on, I just want to talk about Matt Nost for a second. I really do love his character and he added a comedic element that I still wish he would come back and bring back because I always found him so funny.
I don't think he ever wants to step foot in this.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, that character, I just loved so much.
We can carry on that discussion in just a minute. So getting into the back half of the season, obviously we had the first Ultimate Schmoedown tournament happen. Now, for the sake of time, because there are so many matches in a tournament, I didn't pull every single one of those matches to talk about. Obviously, both of those, the tournament culminated at the Spectacular with a number 1 contenders match, and we had the title match happen. But in that second half of the season, in between the tournament matches, they allowed some players to make their debut in an attempt to prepare them for the next season. We'll get into some of those matches. We had, obviously, one of the ones I think everybody remembers, William Bibiani took on Mark Andreyko in what at the time was the highest scoring match of the Schmoedown. That was followed very closely by Matt Nost making, I believe, his second singles appearance against Drew McWeeny in what was his debut. And then, unfortunately, I don't have the image. It was the one image I missed when I was trying to pull them. But we had, as I said earlier, with Cody Miller, a player who came in, won, and walked off into the sunset. Chris Stuckman made his only Schmoedown appearance, won against Jeff Snyder 13-12, and walked off into the sunset, never to be seen again.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and get into that. Colton, I'll head to you first. Which of these 3 matches, especially with some of those players that debuted, kind of strikes you in a good way?
Well, the obvious one is Bibbs and Andreyko. That was such a legendary match. One of the highest scoring games ever to that point and ever period. And they have both went on to have great careers.
Mhm.
Yeah, like it's awesome. They've played so many times. Like I love that match, and then of course like the match with Matt Nosta and Drew McWeeny. That's also a good match, and that started Drew off wonderfully. Like those matches are great. Yep.
Yeah. I'll go to Kevin. Do any of these matches, these three matches, stand out to you?
I don't know if you plan to talk about it later, but I was going to bring up the Ashley Robinson Mike Kalinowski match
It
as
is not
my.
in here. I know it was around that same period, but
Okay.
it is not in this one. No.
Yeah. Yeah, that was around the same time. That was the one that I go back to. But yeah, like Colton said, the Bibbs and Draco rivalry is one that I love. Even going back to this past year where they had the horror, or I don't think it was this last year. I think it was the one before that. But anyway, they were doing like the horror free for all thing or whatever, and it came down to them two and. They just have like this fun rivalry going on where it's always them two and it's always them, trying to get one up on each other. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big McQueenie fan. Never really got that much into Nost, but yeah, I just wanted to bring up the Kalinowski thing.
And that is one I missed, but you're right. That's another person in Mike Kalinowski who made his first appearance in that sector where they were using the gap weeks in between the tournament airing to kind of get players set up to go into the next season. And honestly, looking back on it, like I'll go to the other match that hasn't really been mentioned, the Chris Stuckman one. I think that was their intent with him. I've always believed the intent was to have him come back. I don't know if I don't know if it's just, kind of a loss of contact. I know he doesn't live in LA. He lives in the Midwest, so the traveling thing. But it just kind of never worked out. Before we move on, JD, any of these stand out to you?
As I said, the Mark Andreyko and Bibbs match stands out for a number of reasons. As I said, it is a rivalry that is ongoing still to this day. But also, this is also Bibbs had a similar reputation to Sam Levine for these first couple seasons. After this match, if you could keep it close, you could win against Bibbs. He was always known as the first, like you get him to. He had perfect 2 rounds, but if you could keep it close, he wasn't so good in the 3rd round. So he was kind of like this hit and miss player, and it took a couple of seasons for him to really find like what for him to take off after this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 more sections to go into before we wrap this up. Let's move on to one. There's probably be a little bit of discussion about this one, but it is just the one match. Like we said, they were using this kind of midsection between the tournament ending and the Schmoedown Spectacular, their first ever multi-part big match event, to fill in some new matches. And despite the fact that the Inner Geekdom League was established much quicker, people may forget that the Star Wars League was actually begun before Inner Geekdom, as one of those in-between matches saw the Force Bros come back and team up to take on the Council, John Campia and Ken Knapsack, in a match that would go on to end 41-40, with the Force Bros winning in sudden death. So my first point to this one is, it's really weird to think that the Star Wars League officially began with a teams match, considering that is not an area they'd ever go back to with Inner Geekdom or Star Wars. I mean, at least to date, you never know down the road if that's something they would think about. But it is kind of funny to think that a whole league was begun off of what was essentially a dick measuring contest between 3 guys, and Freddie Prinze being like, yeah, I'll show up, sure.
It started in, actually, if you recall, it actually started in the Sam Witwer versus Freddie Prinze Jr. matches. Like, this was proposed there, and this is kind of like it actually kind of accumulates in. You were going to say, Kevin?
I was gonna say, just it wasn't really the prettiest match either. I go back to a lot of the Star Wars matches to study, and that is I'll go back to that one occasionally because it does have a lot of like non-movie material in it, but some of the questions are not the best, and you can tell. Yeah, you can tell. I think maybe Christian might have written some of those questions.
It was still a fun. It was still a fun match to watch.
It's definitely fun. It's definitely fun. It's just but they start to get a little testy there.
And it really does accumulate in the spectacular, actually, because this is where they, after this match, you get like a little in one of those like spectacular like cut scenes. You get Ken Knapsack and Campia together saying, face Sam and Ken have a one-on-one match. That's where that gets proposed. So it really is this really does kind of, this kind of like accumulates in an interesting way. So I do think it does hold historical value, and I think it's still fun to watch, even though it may not be the prettiest match to watch.
Yeah, I love this match, and also that's the reason why the Schmoedown and all the fan leagues have where you have to write your answer on the board.
Yeah,
and
what is
say it, and it has to be the same answer.
Yeah.
Before that, they could just do whatever, but yeah, like
that's exactly
they got
right.
more strict. They got more strict about it.
Yep, and like what you said was absolutely correct. Like they had this match, and then they cut a segment in the Spectacular saying that there was going to be a rematch at Star Wars Celebration, which honestly, like I was already thinking about going to Star Wars Celebration for that year, but that solidified my choice on going. So I bought my tickets to Orlando that immediately so I could go watch that. And then, of course, like the match was changed in Orlando to a 5-way. But at the time, I thought, oh, this is going to be really cool.
Yeah.
What I really, really like. So,
yeah. People forget that match was initially supposed to be like a one-on-one between like Ken and Sam, and then they just make it a 5-way.
So, speaking of 5-ways, let's go ahead and get into it, guys. We are wrapping up kind of the discussion about Season 3. Well, it doesn't mean we're quite done, because Season 3 took another huge advancement for the Schmoedown towards the first multi-match event, which is something that they would kind of go on and carry on. You know, obviously, the Schmoedown Spectacular was the first one. There's been 5 of those since. I believe we've had 3 Collider Collisions was another event they would create. The idea of the free-for-all being an event spawned from this. That would carry on the next season. And I believe actually for Seasons 4 and a chunk of Season 5, they would even start airing 2 matches together, like just randomly putting up 2 matches in the same video. So this
championship week.
Right.
They would start doing like championship week.
Yes. So this Spectacular, the idea of them doing this really confounded and set up a lot of what would be established over the next couple of years. It gave them a lot of ideas and avenues to go down. So let's get into it. The first match we had was the debut of the Inner Geekdom match. And it was Ashley Robinson, Robert Meyer Burnett, Jeremy Johns, Hector Navarro, and it was a mystery person initially. That mystery person was one John Campia, who participated in the match. And that match would go on. So this is one of the most interesting formatted matches, in my opinion, in the Schmoedown. And we'll go through the Spectacular, keeping within time, but we'll give a little bit of time to each match. So the original 5-way format saw them clear the score at the end of each round. So despite the fact that the overall added scores of the match ended in order of their participation, so I'll pull it back up on the screen, 7, 22, 13, 30, and 14, meaning Hector Navarro did, by a good margin, outscore everybody else. Robert Meyer Burnett, in sudden death, was crowned the first Inner Geekdom champion, and this was by way of them deciding to clear point totals at the end of every round. So I'll go ahead and start with, he is our IG commish, so I'll go ahead and start with Kevin. What are your thoughts on the first IG match?
In my that is really the dumbest way to set it up. In my mind, Hector Navarro should be the first IG champ. There's no two ways about it.
I mean, he did
Burnett did a good job.
That's the face that wins.
Yeah, I know, right? That is the face of a winner. No, Robert Meyer Burnett. I mean, he did well in the match. Don't get me wrong. 22 points is nothing to scoff at.
So yeah, so Navarro scored 8 points more than Burnett, but it should be noted that Burnett also scored 8 points more than the next closest finisher, which was John Campion. So it's not like it was close with the rest of them. He was also ahead of the pack.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe if they would have had them square off at the end or something different, they just didn't have the rules really. I get what they were trying to do, especially as a commissioner of a league, and you're wanting to do something different. But it's definitely don't overthink it. Don't try too hard. Keep it simple, stupid.
And it was, if I remember correctly, I believe it was the first 2 rounds. So one person was eliminated at the end of every round. The first 2 rounds were both a round 1 format. Then they did the wheel with just 3 people. And then the final round was a speed round that ended in a tie that led to sudden death. And for those who may not remember, sudden death was also different rules back then. Sudden death back then was they would both buzz in to answer a question. Whoever got that question correct didn't win the game, but they were instead given another question to answer.
Another question.
If they got that correct, they would win. If not, they would go back to the buzzers. So it's a really again, it's evolving the game as you go. Colton, you're also, I believe all 3 of you guys are IG players. I technically count, but let's go ahead, Colton. What are your thoughts on this match?
The match, I always remember liking it, and it started my history in playing along with the matches because I have never been good at singles. I have never been good at teams, but I am decent in IG. I won't say I'm good because that would be braggadocious, but I'll say I'm decent in IG. So if it wasn't for this match, I would have no part in playing along. So I've really enjoyed that. And if it wasn't for this match, I probably wouldn't be a part of this community because I joined the fan leagues to be in Geek. So, which means I wouldn't half the people I've met, and I definitely wouldn't have my podcast now. So this match is the result of the Supernova show being a thing. So thank you, Robert Meyer Burnett.
And James, you before we move on, what are your thoughts on this match?
I think this is one of the reasons I really started falling in love with the Schmoedown was this match, the establishment of the Inner Geekdom League. I just kind of I'm decent in singles and I'm decent in Inner Geekdom. So these, at the time, some of these people are at a different level. I hope to get to that level someday. I'm not there right now, but I hope, just watching these people at this level doing this type of knowledge, I just, that's why I fell in love with it. And I fell in love with the storylines later on. This in combination with Star Wars matches is really why I fell in love with the Schmoedown. So.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and move on. The second match that aired as a part of this first Schmoedown Spectacular was a team's #1 contender match between, look at ETC taking on Team Trek. Talk about 2 teams that would never be in title contention now, just the way the league is. Especially, we'll get to Wild Berries eventually, but Dewberry definitely didn't go down that track. Yeah, does anybody have anything, in particular they remember or want to think about this match? To me personally, it's, if we're ranking of 5, it's kind of 5 of 5. Trek would go on to win by TKO 14-12. And obviously that would set them up to be the next one to take the title shot against the Patriots, or their first defense, really. But other than that, this match really didn't have anything that stood out to me. It was just kind of, yeah, these are the two teams that have two good records, and they played, and that was that.
I mean, I do kind of like. I did like the team Trek dynamic. Like Scott Mance was this overexcitable like character, and like Jason Inman was the one who had to reel him in. It was an interesting dynamic. I mean, it never. Now they're at best a mid tier team. Like they can they're solid. They would be a solid B team now. Like they'd get you a couple wins, they'll get you points, but it wouldn't. This is not the team that would ever compete for a title.
Yeah. Colton, Kevin, anything to add, or should we move on?
It's such a weird thing. Like, I don't remember anything from this match, but I do remember watching this match and then seeing them play the Patriots and being mad because I'm sure we'll talk about it eventually, the result of that. But that was a messy finish. And I'm sure when we discuss season 4 or whatever at some point, we'll talk about it. So I don't want to give my thoughts on it.
And the other thing is like the ETC thing. They were a joke team. They were a joke kind of like a joke heel team.
Who had a good record.
They just somehow stumbled across a good record somehow. So it's just that ETC, like I said, I don't want to. Trek was a decent team of it, like a top-ish tier team of its time. They wouldn't be now, but like ETC, even back then, they were considered, as I said, a joke team that was just stumbled across a couple wins, so they had to give them a number 1 contender match.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and move on then. We had the team's title match at Spectacular, which was Top 10 versus the Patriots. This one would go on to end in an 18-17 win for the Patriots, taking their first title at the end of season 3, and would go on to be a very long season 4 reigning for them. Obviously, this one might be, looking back on it, the biggest match out of all of them, just because it was the one that kind of began the reign that they would have. They would defend all through season 4, not lose it till season 5. And if you remember, they were also, I believe, either 2-0 or 3-0 perfect at this time. So it's not like they took a loss and then fought back to get there. They were just perfect the whole way through. It's something that I don't think will ever happen again, only because the level of play is much higher now. It's not as easy to dominate as it was.
And there are more super teams now than there used to be. Like, it took Above the Line to beat them finally. And it took them their second try. Like, they didn't win the first try. It was the second try where they won. And then, the third try solidified that Above the Line was the superior team. But it took Above the Line for somebody to beat the Patriots. That was the team. Sam Levine and Drew McLean. That's what it took. And nowadays, there are way more super teams now. Like, at the very least, at least one faction has a super team of some kind. So, yeah, I just don't think that would happen again.
So then I'll also go to Kevin next. Kind of thoughts on the match. This match, looking back on it.
This match, looking back, I mean, top 10 at their record, they looked unstoppable. And then you have the Patriots. You wonder about like ring rust because of they're starting to put more teams in the league, and they're starting to try to they're starting to try to incorporate more teams matches, so they're not being able to play the champions as often. So you're starting to wonder, is ring rust a thing? Obviously they showed it isn't, but all throughout season 3 and 4. But it was a great match. I mean, that I think it ranks up near the top of everybody's like Mount Schmoedown of matches, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah. And before we move on, Colton, thoughts on the match?
I mean, I can't really say anything different than what they said. I mean, the Patriots were the team to beat. I don't think that they were the best team of the era, by any stretch of the imagination. Again, we've talked about stuff that has happened in their reign, and I'm sure we'll get into that when we talk to season 4. But they were a great team, and like they were the first undisputed champions essentially for like over a year and a half. They just killed it.
And as mentioned before, top 10 would never get the belts back. I mean, it was so devastating that they were talking about, you know, doing a third match in a basketball court.
Yeah, and not only that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, not only that, it's John Roca wouldn't get the belt back until he teamed with the GOAT. So, like, that says something.
Yeah. So speaking of Roca, we'll move on to the 4th match of the spectacular, and I call this period with the singles title the trio circle jerk, because it was just kind of going back and forth between these 3 guys. And this was another match that would really solidify it, because we had John Roca take on Mark Riley in what was a #1 contenders match. Both finished pretty high in the tournament. Roca, obviously, I believe Riley was semifinals. Roca made it to the finals, then lost to a man we'll talk about in a minute. And so they would go on to play each other in the #1 contenders match, and Roca would win this 19-16 to give him his first singles title shot. I'll go ahead and go to Colton first on this one. What are your thoughts about this match?
So I remember loving this match. Like, this was the first real shot at Roca. Like, I still contend that Roca is the greatest character we've ever had, and this was just another step in the point of him getting the title match and then doing what he did next season in season 4. So this was just a step on the way, and like, I think it was a good time. Like, the match was good. This feud with Riley is really interesting now, knowing that then they became horsemen together, but at the time they wanted to kill each other. So,
that was the interesting thing about it. Was like, this was the beginning of, like, you know, they would play each other. I want to say it's like 3 or 4 times. Like, it was 4. Yeah, it was 4. Because
they would play each other a number of more times.
I mean, singles wise, I think it was 4 times. It was this one, then they had a second one where Roca won again, then they would do it a third time where Riley won, and then there was the all season 4, but like, you had the Roca, Dan Murrell, and Riley match. But yeah, it was the beginning of, like, Roca and Riley were at, like, each other's throats. And if you want to call him, I guess he is the original character. He was the one who brought characters into the Schmoedown, if you want to call it that. I just think it's a heightened version of his personality, but it definitely, at the very least, it brought characters into the Schmoedown. So, you know, that's what it is. A lot of people didn't even know that he was playing a character. That's how rough it was. Supposedly. So, but yeah, it definitely has a spot. It's pretty.
Yeah, and then Kevin, go ahead. What are your thoughts on this match before we get to the final one?
My thoughts on this match kind of bleed into my thoughts on the season itself. You can kind of tell, like what you kind of said it yourself. Like, it was kind of a circle jerk of all these guys playing each other. I mean, if you look at their records, like 4-2 for Roca, 6-2 for Riley, and then, I mean, even the guys who played a lot, the average for a singles player that season was like 2-2. All the big name players, Dan, Mark, Christian, Josh McCouga, they all had like 8, 6, 5, 4 matches. So you could tell, but then you could start seeing like the collider effect start to happen, where it wasn't. They started having like less matches. and the people who were actually better at trivia started kind of having more matches. But as far as this particular match, I don't really remember that much of it. I mean, I remember this is when Roka was at his best, I guess. So that's about the only input I can put into it there.
True. Yeah. And and obviously, this would be something that we'll get into in the next video, but these two would go on to rematch each other twice very quickly, and both of those would end in different ways. So, but with that, we'll go ahead and move into the final match of this video and of Season 3, which was Dan Murrell taking on Tournament winner Mark Ellis, who I've lovingly come to call Santa Ellis. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of Santa Ellis, but I did keep this gem from last week to show Ellis's personality. Just look at him. Isn't that the smile everyone loves?
I mean, Santa Ellis, I don't know what you can say about. That's really what I remember about this match is Santa Ellis. It was an absolute delight watching him just to come out in Santa and doing like all these Christmas puns. I mean, even like it warmed like it even warmed like it warmed the heart of Dan Murrell so much that he like broke character like consistently throughout that match. Like he was, as I said, he was supposed to be like this in-betweener, and like even he couldn't keep it up during this match. It's just fantastic. I can't speak enough to the the talents of Mark Ellis.
Yeah. Colton, go ahead. What were your thoughts on this match?
All right, so I like the match. I love the storyline that followed this was Dan joining the Lions Den. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I wish they had went somewhere with it. But I love the idea of that. That was him going heel and joining with the most hated faction that I think we've ever had was Finstock leading the Patriots and forming the Lions Den. Like what happened there, like, and Dan being like, well, for me remembering reading the Bible, Daniel was in the Lions Den, so I have no choice. So he joined, and that was Dan going heel. And I loved every second of that, and it was good times.
And then, Kevin, I'll go ahead and let you go. What were your thoughts on the match?
Yeah, the storyline was great. I agree with Colton. I wish they would have gone somewhere with it. But Dan ultimately, going 4-0 on the season, taking the championship home 23-20, doing his business, and doing what he does best, being the greatest of all time. That says it all right there to me.
I'm kind of with you guys, but I'm kind of not with this whole Dan Murrell turn. I know he did turn heel, but liking it because here's the thing. This is, as I said, this match kind of is, as I remember it, kind of made holes into why Dan Murrell wasn't really a great heel character at the time. Like he was, it didn't fit his. You could see that it didn't really in this match, in play. It didn't really fit his personality. So that to me, that was kind of like the issue with him going heel at the end of that was, you saw during this match that, it didn't really vibe. And then, that's why I don't think it went anywhere because it just, you could see in this match it didn't vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Looking back on this, obviously, this was, and this kind of goes in conjunction with the Patriots, this was the spectacular that I think really solidified both Murrell and the Patriots as kind of the best, the bar to beat within their league. Even though Murrell would go on to lose that title very soon, it really established that these are the top tier in each division. These are the players to beat. And even if Murrell loses, he goes on to win again and establish it. And I think this is really where it all began. And obviously, yeah, with between Murrell, Roka, and Riley, we kind of saw that building throughout the season, but this was the spectacular that really solidified for the next season or so that kind of circular motion between the three of they're always going to end up playing each other in some way, and one of them's going to win. And it quite literally took, people stepping away to make that not happen anymore. But yeah, so overall, I think when you look back on it, I think in at least in my opinion, to kind of wrap this up, in the retrospect of it, it's not the best spectacular, but for their first attempt ever at a live event, it is pretty solid. And I think it did a great job at putting forth not only some exciting matches, but it set up the future. It set up who your champs were, it set up your next title shots, and it set up an entire league going forward, even if it wasn't quite the format that people were thinking of. So with that being said, though, guys, I am going to wrap this up. We are at the hour 20-minute mark. JD, very quickly, thank you for coming on. Is there anything you would like to plug that you're doing on other channels?
So let's see. You can follow me at JD Domash. That's my Twitter. I pretty recently have been on featured presentation doing fantasy film fights. I've been on Movie Hero a couple times. Yeah, you can find me. You can find all updates on my Twitter feed.
Yeah. And just to kind of wrap it up, I'll speak on behalf of my fellow TMG people here. Guys, here on TMG Entertainment, be sure to check out everything we're putting out. Myself and Matt Beer are really working to put forward some different types of shows and really diversify the content that we have. Obviously, Colton hosts the Supernova Show. I'm hosting SchmoeTalks. We have After Dark every Saturday night at 10 p.m. EST, 7 p.m. PST. We also have Matt and Alan Shepard's new political show that's going up every Tuesday. We have Inside the Horseshoe, which is on a little bit of an in-and-out hiatus due to the off-season, but they go full scale when the football season's happening. And we have some other stuff potentially coming soon, so be on the lookout for that. Over on TMG Trivia, Kevin Poss is putting up all the unedited, uncut. You guys get to see the Geek tournament go up. Some editing issues came up along the way, and then the Schmoedown happened and said, fuck you, get it up quickly. So that's what we're doing. Be sure to check out TMG Trivia. Subscribe to both channels to stay up on the latest for all the content we have as our trivia leagues are gearing up to begin going into the new year and getting the production back up and running again. That being said, guys, thank you so much for checking out SchmoeTalks. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, be on the lookout as we continue